In my book, a gimmick is about on par with the actual premise of a series. What I mean by that is they each hold about the same amount of weight when it comes to hooking me. But likewise, both shouldn't be all a series, film, or book has to offer, and shouldn't be expected to fill the place of something more substantial like plot or character development. Because without sufficient investment into those additional pieces, you're relying on what is essentially a stunt to keep you interested for hours. And series can fall into this trap, especially with regards to a gimmick. Something that, by its nature, is meant to be more enticing than just a description of the plot and characters. Often it ends up being one feature or facet that aims to set the show apart from other members of its genre. So it's not really surprising at all that anime has a lot of gimmicks. I think it's partially why it's impossible to describe most of your favorite shows without making it sound 10 times more absurd than it actually is. Naked giants attack the last remnants of mankind. A guy who can defeat literally anyone with a single punch. Kid sets out in search of his father, only to become best friends with an assassin, save him from his own family, get mixed up with a separate band of killers, enter a video game that's only sort of a video game, and fight against a race of ants who take on the traits of the animals they consume. And yet, even with all that, I'm leaving out who his dad is, Nen, and the fight sexual murder clown. Of course, this isn't true of all genres, as plenty of series choose to play things straight for the most part, with maybe one or two unique aspects to entice potential viewers. Shows like Girls Last Tour, Maid Dragon, and Zombieland Saga all come to mind on the more obvious side of that spectrum. And those are also what I would consider good examples of how to use a gimmick. But before I get into what shows like that do right, I need to give an example of just how much of a hindrance a shtick can be when it's misused. So let's do this. The bad example, as you probably could have guessed, comes from this winter season. Enter Bermuda Triangle Colorful Pastorale, a slice of life and most likely at some point idol show featuring mermaids. I say most likely because they're kind of telegraphing it and it says it in the description, but they haven't really gotten to that stuff yet aside from referencing the fact that one of the girls is one. Speaking of the girls, as you can see, their character designs range from, hey, is that Homura, to, kill it with fire! Oh wait, we're underwater! What? Alright. I know this is so blatant and it's painfully obvious that they just don't care, but it still irks me.
Whoever sent this obviously has no idea about the physical limitations of life underwater.
It really just starts to stack up after a while. Trying to play it straight makes any actual attempts at world building just come off as cheap. Like they thought about those parts, but couldn't be bothered to work out a creative solution for something like tea. Even a series as episodic and silly as SpongeBob managed that. It'd be one thing if it was something central to the story or themes of the show, but it's really not. The argument can be made then that because it is something so minor, it's pointless to complain about. And I get that, but I am a very detail-oriented person, and to me, these little things can show just how much effort was put into crafting this universe. Also, for the big picture people in the audience, these oversights do extend to more plot-relevant points. Like at the end of the first episode, when the girls discover an old movie theater that kind of becomes the catalyst for the rest of the show, at least in the short term. The reason it was discovered was thanks to a strong current rolling through and moving away some of the reefs that were apparently blocking the entrance, thus the girls posit that's why they never saw it. But give this scene more than a millisecond of thought, and it kind of all falls apart. Sure, the entrance was blocked, maybe by a shitload of coral, but based on the following shots, the building itself is out in the open and is also quite big. Even ignoring them maybe being able to see over the obstruction in the first place, let's give them the benefit of the doubt, right? You are underwater! There is a third dimension that can be quite easily accessed. How did you never swim over it? Or see it from a reasonable distance when you were entering or leaving town? Even by accident, you think they might have noticed it. And you want to know the kicker, or I suppose in this case, the flipper? It's not like this would have been that hard of a fix. Just stick the theater in an alcove or cave or something just outside the city. Then it'd be reasonable that you only discovered it once the blockage had been cleared. See? Easy. Otherwise, with it set as is, what's the difference between this and just having it set in some random countryside on land? The answer is pretty much nothing. Unless there's something appealing about having your waifu and eating them too. I'm sorry, I didn't think before that one, but on the bright side, that snapped me out of my foul mood. But my stance on this gimmick remains the same. It adds hardly anything to the series and likewise doesn't commit enough to the bit to keep me engaged. That might have been about the only thing that could have saved Colorful Pastorale from being so egregiously boring. And that's honestly the best compliment I can give the show. It's not the gimmick that makes it dull, it's unwatchable in spite of it. Like they used it as a substitute for any actual substance when the bit isn't nearly strong enough to coast on for an episode, let alone a whole season. Which is why a good gimmick ends up being primarily a bonus on top of an already entertaining series. It's the icing on the cake. And so for the positive examples of this, let's go with two other series that also featured an idol theme, but with a twist. Zombieland Saga and Musume. Both of these are, at least to me, far superior shows for a whole number of reasons. Chief among them would be the characters. Just even on a design or aesthetic level, horse and zombie girls way outrank this. Like, Christ, man, I didn't know that Bermuda Triangle in the title stood for the shape of their eyes. Seriously, I fully believe their designs would improve tenfold if you just changed that one aspect. Even so, that is entirely superficial, and the true merits of a character carry beyond the appeal of their looks. And with Musume and Zombieland Saga, the girls are excellent and feature a wide range of designs and personalities. Now, I am coming at this from the perspective of having watched both series to completion, meanwhile, Colorful Pastorale only has 4 episodes currently out. So it is possible arcs will happen and characters will develop, but for the time being, the most unique thing about each of them is that they're mermaids. Yeah, you might see where this is going. The gimmick is shouldering too much weight. Look at the aforementioned contemporaries. In Musume, the fact that girls are horses provides the basis for the plot and largely leaves it at that. Sure, using the same argument as our mermaid girls, could this show have just been about a regular track team? Of course. Although that would have made the ham-fisted idol portion somehow more ridiculous. But again, the gimmick is present as a fun addition. Without it, there wouldn't have been this delightful gag of Special Week running to class, or this old man randomly having a carrot on him during his daily stroll, or this comically oversized phone that can reach both their mouth and ears. Plus, having them all be namesakes of actual racehorses that had significant careers adds a whole new layer to the story, with both major plot points and small details being direct references. And really, if you want to go tit for tat and point out the physics for Musume as I did with the tea thing, then yes, the gimmick does falter slightly. Because unless air resistance and drag just aren't things in this universe, there's no practical reason for their racing outfits to be this garish. It makes about as much sense as Michael Phelps trying to swim while wearing all of his gold medals. But at least here, I can make the argument that their outfits provide enough personality and plot relevance, seeing as how they're clearly marketed in-universe, to override basic laws of common sense and friction. It really doesn't take much for a gimmick to clear that hurdle either, at least for me, because something can also be said about how because Musume fully commits to its shtick, I'm more willing to give it a pass for the smaller things. Even with that in mind though, a series like Zombieland Saga has even fewer shortcomings with its gimmick while providing an arguably bigger hook. Taking an equally absurd premise as Musume, but unapologetically dragging much of its audience far closer to the pitfall of idol fandom. Not that I'm really complaining, because this show is an example of one that uses its gimmick to the fullest, without ever over-relying on it. The fact the main cast are zombies never gets old, in part because it was always meant to be a driving force for the comedy. But at the same time, their zombie nature is also something that gets explored in truly unique ways for several characters, coming to terms with what this new undead life means for them. I've already talked about this at length in another video, it'll be linked down below if you're interested, but this is what I'm getting at. There was no wasted potential here on the silly or the serious. And even the girls themselves had gimmicks they tried using, either individually or as a group, to increase their appeal as idols. Something that I'm sure characters in other shows of this genre and in real life do to an extent. So you end up with a gimmick that works on just about every level. Layers for the audience in-universe and out. Colorful Pastorale seems like they're trying to do something similar when it comes to commenting on the idol industry by having that bubble or shell thing be triggered by stress or whatever, but that seems like it's gonna be a season-long thing. Zombieland Saga dealt with that type of trauma and more spectacularly in the span of a single episode. And unlike the argument for both our sushi and IKEA girls, many of these elements, the physical comedy, era juxtaposition, and overall inhumanity, wouldn't be the same if they were just regular people. The zombie gimmick is essential to both the appeal and themes of the series. even speaking from a nitpicking standpoint, there's not a lot that Zombieland Saga actually fumbles with. It can get a little repetitive, if not dumb, when lol random thing happens and the girls wonder why and just shrug it off saying, must be cause we're zombies. But even that is balanced out with other moments that clearly show the creators were thinking about the undead implications. Junko's body growing mushrooms, the snapping and decaying sounds their bodies make when moving, and even just the fact that they constantly have to wear makeup out in public. That last one especially showcases my point, because before their big outdoor concert, I remember talking with my friend about how they had already established their makeup isn't waterproof, and we were wondering if Tatsumi would try to do anything, or if shit would just hit the fan because of the impending thunderstorm. Sure enough though, the creators, and Tatsumi as a result, thought ahead with a dumb but clever solution. The message here is that gimmicks aren't bad. Far from it. If done right, they can add an extra level of appeal and depth to your story. Likewise, they don't always have to be some absurd or supernatural facet. Plenty of series are able to create that initial hook with very simple tricks. So don't tie yourself down worrying that your story needs to have some crazy premise or special twist. In the end, it's all about understanding what the limitations of your gimmick are, while also understanding that it can't exclusively be the driving force. The good examples I mentioned all seemed aware of this fact. It's great for establishing interest in the beginning, but if you don't try to develop any other aspects, investment will wane and you'll be left with a story that's all fluff and no substance. Those make for some of my personal least favorite shows, because I just feel like I'm watching a whole lot of nothing. And that's exactly the feeling Colorful Pastorale has left me. Even if it ends up turning things around, I'm sure I'm not the only person you'll need to convince to give it a second chance. But those are just my thoughts, and as always, I'd love to hear what you have to say. What's your favorite example of a simple but effective gimmick? Likewise, what's the most complex one you still ended up loving? Or you could do least favorite and hate for those two. Any and all additional comments are welcome down below. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, an especially big thanks goes out to my awesome patrons, PenguinPandaZero, OverjoyedSoup, MVPino, James Morton, Mr. Idealist, Marbled Ranger, Spudge, Beorn, and everyone else whose support helps make videos like these possible. If you'd like to join those awesome people, links to that Patreon, my shirts, and everything else are either down below or on the screen right now. Leave a like and click that bell icon to keep up to date. Stay awesome, and I'll see you next time.